on Central Coast Conversations, a man who served Australia in the military with great pride and had some amazing adventures and amazing camaraderie as a commando, as a signals operator, with clearance divers, all sorts of active duty as well in Afghanistan. But then, like many veterans, they fall off a bit of a cliff when they get out of that scene, and he's decided to help people through reclaiming their power. He's got a real mantra. And Craig Ball joins us in the studio. G'day, Craig.
G'day, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
Craig, you've done some great things for mental health here on the Central Coast, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's start with your journey, and I can quote from your book, which is really about techniques on how to keep our mental health going strong. It's called Reclaim Your Power, and you write, Reclaim Your Power. This is an approach that I've used ever since the very early 2000s. It helped me with several battles throughout my life, and I know it will help you with yours. Not only to be okay, but to thrive like yourself. My list is long. I've had to work through bullying, PTSD, depressive disorders, alcohol use disorders, anxiety and grief. What I'll share with you has helped me to not only move forward, but to live a much happier life, a more empowered life. So is that something that also reinforces your battle, helping people? Is that... You see that with AA and things, don't you? I'm an alcoholic. You always admit that you've had a problem.
Yep.
And does this help you also?
Very much. It's the thing that really helped me when I left the military and started to understand, you start to unpack some of those problems. There's things that come out in the findings of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide is that the rate of veteran suiciding is very, very low when they're serving and very high when they leave. So that happens, you have that falling off the cliff, so to speak, if you like, when you do leave. And slowly over time, out come these conditions. And so I've been teaching, as I said in that passage, this system for a long, long time, and it really helped me to with my battles moving through it.
And what caused your battles? Was it sort of like going off a cliff when you left the military, isolation, depression? What was it? Because you loved it, didn't you? You really enjoyed it. You actually sought out your military career. You started as a reservist.
That's 100%. Yeah, I started a reservist in Sydney, and I've started as an infantier and really...
Went through Holsworthy first?
Yeah, I went through... Back then, in the 90s, you could still do 2-week recruit courses for reservists. So I did one of those, and I did a 2-week infantry course, but with no skills and with no experience of weapons or any of that sort of stuff.
How old were you?
I was about 25, 26 at that point. And yeah, it doesn't help. The kids, you could see the kids who'd grown up on farms. They just got it, and it was a different world altogether. But it certainly started to set me up and help me to develop some disciplines and some.
And how did you get on? I mean, you seem like a really social bloke. You love social interaction. You love teamwork. It seems like the right place for you.
It very much was. And that turned out to be the case later in my life. When in my early 30s I made the decision to go full-time, I realised, okay, there's a number of things I could do here to get more life experience. I didn't like where my life was going and the responses I was having and lack of success and so forth. And I thought, I'm going to go and follow some advice I got and go full-time in the Army for a few years.
How do you prepare, though, for trudging through knee-deep snow with 60 kilos of signals gear and weapons on your back on a patrol in Afghanistan? I mean, that's pretty extreme, isn't it?
It is. Well,
try to carry a 20-kilo pack for any length of time and then triple that. It's almost superhuman what you had to do.
Well, I'll first to say I'm no natural and try as I might, I wasn't as prepared as I needed to be. Thankfully, there wasn't snow by the time I got there, but my first patrol was exactly like what you're talking about. I was falling over. We had the area where we were, there was shale. It was like a shaly sort of rock that was crumbling under your feet non-stop.
It's a massive mountain range, isn't it? I mean, it's hugely rugged terrain.
I felt my legs turn to jelly the first night, a number of times. Like listeners might, who might have done, PT in school, might have had the experience doing high jump or trying to jump up and down on those huge big mats that they use for high jump, and your legs turn to jelly.
Yeah,
it was like that, but I was just walking.
Yeah. And did you let on to your fellow platoon that you were absolutely knackered? Because you had the signal gear, up to 45 to 60 kilos of stuff on your back.
I just did my best. I just held it up, gripped it up and tried to move through it.
What impact does that have on your body now?
Significant, I think. Yeah, there's back problems and stuff, niggles that just come and go. A very dear friend of mine who was on that patrol even says to me to this day, he said, you can tell you're stuffed from your service, your gait's all over the place. I have to admit, though, the physio I'm seeing at the moment who's helping me with some of that is much more complimentary of my gait, but he said the way that you're walking in that, he said it's just like, it makes me giggle.
They get a lot of feet problems too, don't they? They're so hard on the feet when your foot's slogging. And tell us about those times of active service, because you sought that out, that active service, didn't you?
I did.
You could have stayed back in the signal room.
100%. And when I first signed up, I got talked into being a particular trade within the Signals Corps that wouldn't have seen me doing active service. And the whole process was starting to get to me. And I went and saw the sergeant at the School of Languages and said, I don't want to do this job. I want to be a radio operator. Get me out of here, get me back to training so I can finish my radio operator's training and serve a platoon in the an infantry platoon somewhere and get out in the field.
You've got lovely clear diction. That would have been a starting point.
It does. However, the best voices for speaking over the radio are often female voices because they're a little bit more high-pitched and that carries better.
Right. Tell us about that service, or what you can tell us about it. Obviously there would be highs and lows and things you saw that no doubt contributed to problems later, but at the time, I guess, it's all new.
It is. The highs were achieving things or passing physical tests or getting accepted. For me, being a social person, as you mentioned, was feeling accepted into a platoon was a pretty big thing. I had the great privilege of having a lot of guys come and talk to me about their problems or things that had happened for them or things that they'd seen and done, and I consider that to be a privilege. I still do today when guys on the walk or who I might be working with in a workplace will come and tell me things and explain and open up to me. I consider that to be quite a blessing to have people feel comfortable enough to do that, and that would happen a lot. Lows would be around when somebody dies in service and you go to their funeral or dies on the battlefield. That is some of the hardest stuff because you may not have been on the same selection course or the same training, but you've been through the same training, maybe not at the same time. So you've got this accepted team thing that we've all done similar difficult things together. And that loss and that grief is really, really hard. And one of the ways I used to cope with that, and I used to explain that to people when we'd come back from a funeral or whatever, I'd look around and everyone would be sitting there looking pretty bad. And I'd say, look, this is sadness. Okay, what we're going through now, what we're experiencing, this is sadness. It's grief if you're the family. It's devastating if you're the family, but we are experiencing sadness. And remember, sadness passes.
You talk about choosing to do something about it in your book, Reclaim Your Power. You may not be able to choose to be happy if you've got mental illness, but you can choose to get some help. Is that what you're referring to?
100%. It's hard to choose to be happy. But you've got to also give yourself permission to be happy. And if you're starting to take the right steps to look after your mental health, and I'm a big advocate for professional counselling. I see a counsellor every fortnight. I highly recommend people do it because it helps to clear everything out. Your family, the people in your life, they are there to support you, but they're not qualified, and we don't want to burden others so much, and there's no reflection on it, what anybody has to share, but a professional person can help you unpack it and unplug it in a way that will serve you and help everybody around you because you come back to your life so much better.
Was it a accumulation of things that got you down when you left the military, or was it just that sort of leaving the bosom of friends and comrades?
Both, actually. Yeah. Accumulation of things. You think that you're okay. You don't know how to diagnose things within yourself. And when you get out, there's no longer something to sort of, grip it up for. And over time, you start to notice things. And I was very lucky. My wife started to notice things for me. And it wasn't until I saw that I could get help from DVA that I started to go through the getting diagnosed for what I actually had. And when I called her up after I'd got my formal diagnosis from the psychiatrist, she was in tears. She said, I'm so happy that you've gone and done this because now we know what we're up against. Yeah.
You also took notes because you're really interested in psychology, aren't you? And you became a bit of a student of the whole art and science.
100%. I've been a student since I even started studying. Before I started studying for a degree in psychology, I used to subscribe to Psychology Today and other magazines like that, which offer some really interesting insights. But it got to the point on my first deployment towards the end of it that we were coming back from a job on driving a Bushmaster over the last bit of the blacktop of what was Route Bear going back to Uruzgan.
That must be really nerve-wracking to know that any minute an IED could go off. Those things are pretty good, though. We're seeing in the Ukraine that they are very good at saving lives with the way they deflect the blasts and things.
They're amazing. They're one of the best tools ever made by Australian Defence Industries and, I believe, Thales. Nobody ever died in an explosion from a Bushmaster in Afghanistan that I'm aware of. But I realised if I came over this hill, it was like I was trying to suss out my life and how it was going to work getting back. And I said, just get back home when you do and start that psych degree up again and finish it. Because if you don't, you're always going to have this hanging over you. I never did it, or I never tried to do it. And I was starting to get to that point in my life where I was kicking goal or ticking boxes or filling buckets, or whatever you want to call it, hitting things off my bucket list of what I wanted my life to be about. And this was part of that process. So I thought, look, you're going to want to be able to help others. You're going to want to be able to expand on or better serve these people who want to come to you and share and open up. Go home and get that done.
We're speaking with Craig Ball on Central Coast Conversations, and he started a great group for mental health, which we'll talk about in just a moment, for men on the Central Coast. But were there specific things that still haunt you, you know, what you saw over there? Because they're lovely people. People are great wherever you go, but they've been through hell and still going through hell.
They certainly are. Incredible people, and you've got to look outside. There's some cultural things that are just completely different, and I mean no offence by that. They had completely different lives, completely different lifestyles, all sorts of things. But we had to find the commonality, and thankfully, Australian sense of humour translates in Afghanistan beautifully well. And I was able to help empower them when I had the privilege to be a mentor with the HF radio capability. And I've developed some amazing relationships. And I had guys coming up to me going, when you get out of the army, like, of course, through an interpreter, you can come to live in Afghanistan with us and we'll build you a mud hut and you can live next door to our boss and all this. And what the interpreter was explained to me was this to them. They really love you, calling you, you're doing this for them. One day, one of the guys came back after a mission and he goes, my Afghani name was Hoshal, which means happy. And he came up to me and he goes, Hoshal, attack! And I was like, okay. I didn't know what it meant. And I went up to the interpreter. I said, what does attack mean? He goes, there's no word in Pashtun means attack. And I said, well, he keeps calling me Hoshal attack. He goes, oh. I go, what do you mean? Oh, he goes, Hoshal attack was an ancient philosopher for like a few hundred years ago, warrior, poet, and philosopher. He said, if they're calling you that, they really like you, man.
Right.
So the bridges had been built, and
you're reincarnated.
Yeah, because I made a point of understanding as best I could the culture, very patriarchal. And when I'd do a training session, if somebody had moved ahead, so teaching them the radio, and somebody, for example, turns on the radio charger, puts the radio on it, and before we get to that part of the lesson, I got them to stand up and made them the hero, and we gave them a clap. And I said, there was a particular individual called Lando who'd done this. I go, everybody look at Lando. He's the example. Look how well he's done. He already knows how to put the radio on the charger, so it's now going to be workable next time we get out in the field. And everyone cheered him on, and a smile, you could never get rid of it. But they saw I was genuinely there because I cared about them, and I wanted them to succeed, and it just went both ways. It was amazing.
Is it all for naught now? You know, all of that work done and women starting to get a go, and that did start way back, after the Russian war as well. Women all of a sudden started to get a bit of a go. Is that all gone now, or do you think that the seeds were sown for possibly a more inclusive society down the track? We
can wander this one forever, and I'm really glad you raised that question, because I did a couple of posts or videos and things online about how a lot of veterans may be feeling. I had the view when I was there that, look, we know when this country gets handed back, if the Taliban comes in and takes over, these people will, if they don't escape to Pakistan, have a good chance of being killed. We understood that. And I think that the best way to see some meaning in it is in the time we were there, because you can't control it. And you can only control, or you can only influence the time that you're there. And I say to people, ask yourself, if you were served over there, if in the time that you were there, you felt that your efforts achieved something and made somebody's life just a little bit better for the 4.5 or 6 months that you were there, you can hang your hat on that and be proud of what you achieved. Because when you leave, you'll never, you can't control that. And another group might have rolled in, or it might have been handed over to another allied military, for example, and they might have rained down bombs on them and it would have been blown up anyway. Like, you just don't. There's so many what ifs that if you feel that you did your best and in the interactions that you had, you were fair, and people were empowered because of what you did, whether you took their village back for a week. When you got the Taliban out of the village and took it back for a week, that week is something that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Whether or not the Taliban might have come in and taken it over and hurt people more, we don't know. But you did your best, and you got to hang your hat on that, I think.
You have worked out a way to deal with all of the issues you've had, and you can articulate it very well. What about people who can't? People who just don't have that ability. How can you help them?
First, the best advice I have is seek help. Don't be afraid to reach out and start talking about it. I had a thought earlier when you're talking about sharing those experiences. I think as veterans, we are custodians of this experience of war that we've had, and it's our job to help educate the public by sharing and talking about it and being open about it. Start to share. Now, there's also listeners, of course, who can't do that, maybe didn't serve, maybe they're not the characteristics, but they may be struggling as well. And understand that when things are difficult, just reach out for help. Don't be too proud, and don't be too proud to open up, because your family, they might not understand, but if you say, look, this is really tough, I'm doing it tough, even just to label it, this is difficult, let's start the conversation somehow. And if you don't have that opportunity, think to yourself, who can I possibly help here? Think outside of yourself. Is there a young person that that's struggling a little bit? Now, you might be struggling, but it might help you a little bit just to be able to go, hey, look, I understand, I've had these experiences in my life, I might be able to help you, because it'll then get you out of your own shell, but it'll also give meaning and use to your experiences and help you to do something with them, because I think everybody listening here is an expert in the things that they've experienced and achieved in their life, and they have the power to then help somebody else's situation.
Just recently we've spoken about two very organic and very simple concepts in men's health. One's the men's table. Central Coast set up Table 17. There's now over 100 of them where men just go and sit and have a meal somewhere. There's sort of rules. You don't talk about footy or trivial things, and you don't have to talk if you don't want to. It's exactly what you're saying, listening. You don't even have to offer advice. And then your idea, the men's walking group, just the same, so simple. Someone who's studied psychology and written a book about it, it seems as if this is the least complex solution that someone could find. Both of those initiatives that are going gangbusters are just as simple as it gets. Is the old KISS principle or something? Why do they work?
I think because they are simple. I think it's because you've got to have a couple of factors that will make any of it work, which is what's a simple interaction that we can have? Going for a walk and having a chat, meeting for a meal. And I'm actually going to chase up and follow the men's table and go along to one now that you've mentioned it, because I'm dying to see how that works, because I've heard a lot of people recommend it to me, so it'll be fascinating to go along. But pick something simple and remove all judgment. Hence why often I get asked, what would you recommend somebody do if they want to get started improving their mental health? Forgive yourself first. Start to forgive yourself. I'm not saying accept the behaviour that you might have done that is bad, but forgive yourself for it, and forgive yourself, stop beating yourself up. But the first step is just to breathe and go, okay, I made that mistake, or I did whatever that thing is I've been hanging on to. Just starting to let go is huge. And that's a simple, non-judgmental concept. And it's the same with the walk. Everybody's welcome. Everybody shows up. They get a handshake. I welcome them in. I introduce them around. We do a whole lot of stuff around that to help make everyone feel good. And I always have a couple of little rituals. I always take a photo of the whole group. And then often after that, everyone's they're all waiting for me to share something or an update or something like that. It's a really great scenario. And then at the turnaround, most people, they stop at the turnaround point and they don't want to keep walking. The conversations just keep going. So let it be its own beast, and let it don't hold too many rules around it, I think.
And how many are you expecting at the next one?
Well, I'm really hoping to get over the 20 mark again this week. Last week we had the kids, we had Bring Your Kids, and we had a new time, which was a bit of a felt like it would be a bit of a challenge for some people, just if they got the updates or not.
It was getting darker earlier, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So we started at 6 and we said invite your kids, and we had 24, I think, total.
Where and when again, for those who'd like to join the walk?
At the Saturday Street end of the Tuggerawong Pathway in Tuggerawong, and we turn around at March Street. So it's about a 5K walk all up.
And you get there at 5 o'clock?
I get there about 20 to 6.
20 to 6, and then it'll go to 5 as when daylight saving kicks in.
We're looking to go to 5 about deeper into winter, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll have to play it by ear.
Yeah, see how much light you've got.
Yeah, but look at the website, and the Facebook group. So
What's the website called?
The website is centralcoastmenswalk.com. And that's about to be launched. It should be launched by the time your listeners are
hear this.
Hear this. Yeah. I've just done all the setup this week, but it's the timings will be up there. But currently, we're looking at we are doing 6 o'clock starts.
Would you like this to go like the men's table, to have men's walks on all the pathways? Maybe the Woy Woy to Gosford and Kincumber and all of the other shared pathways around the place?
I'd love to, and I'm actually looking at ways I can start to do that. And I've got a couple of guys down this way, the good mates, that might be interested. I'm going to be reaching out to them soon to say, how can we start a Gosford one? And where I'll be doing Tuggerawong every week, but with a young family, I can't do all the walks in a week. So, but there are some ones around Australia that are doing it, but I think the Central Coast has so much potential to get guys walking. Craig
Ball, fantastic to talk to you, and your little book is a real life changer. It's called Reclaim Your Power. It's a really good little self-help book on first aid for mental health.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Conversations.
Cheers, Scott.